She was mopping the corridor, wearing her blue uniform. No one had ever noticed her hands, those hands that had saved countless lives in surgeries over the years. The doctors just called her the cleaning lady, until a young soldier with a glass shard lodged in his throat was brought to the emergency room and began bleeding out right before the chief doctor's eye. Margaret Wilson was 68 years old. Every morning she woke up at 4:30 a.m. and followed the same simple routine. As Johnny Cash's "I Walk the Line" played on her old record player, she would briefly glance at faded military photographs, then put on her blue cleaning uniform as if it were a military dress, very different from her old one. But to Margaret, discipline was discipline. She had been working in the gleaming corridors of Walter Reed Military Medical Center in Maryland for 15 years. Her modest salary supplemented her pension and gave meaning to her day. The hospital staff knew her as Quiet Margaret. She rarely spoke, did her job, and never bothered anyone. Dr. Eric Taylor was the hospital's rising star, 35 years old, graduated top of his class from Johns Hopkins, published 3 prestigious papers, and had his eyes set on becoming the chief of medicine. The young doctor disliked those older than him, especially those he considered uneducated, like Margaret. "Margaret, you need to clean the emergency room. The corridor can wait," said head nurse Janet. Margaret nodded and quietly headed toward the ER. In the hallway, Dr. Taylor and his young assistants passed by her, discussing hospital policy. "Do these cleaners really need to be everywhere? I saw 3 of them on my way to surgery, probably spreading germs," Taylor said, ignoring Margaret's presence. "And the elderly one, they should know when it's time to retire," added one of the assistants, snickering. Margaret heard but didn't react. She didn't care how people saw her. It was better they didn't know who she really was. Just then, the hospital alarm sounded. An emergency patient was coming in from the nearby military base. Margaret stepped aside and leaned her mop against the wall. The large glass doors opened, and a young soldier covered in blood was carried in on a stretcher. "Traffic accident, glass shrapnel in the neck, oxygen levels dropping," shouted the paramedic. Dr. Taylor immediately stepped forward. "Throat trauma, prepare the operating room." Margaret didn't move, just watched, her hands in her uniform pockets, her eyes fixed on the wound in the soldier's throat. The scene was familiar, even after 40 years. As Dr. Taylor examined the patient, Dr. Richard Monroe, the hospital's 70-year-old chief of medicine, entered the emergency room. He was a tall figure with silver hair and commanded respect. "What's the situation, Taylor?" "Glass shard near the carotid artery. We're taking him to the operating room," said Taylor. "He's losing too much blood. He won't make it to the OR," Monroe said with concern. Taylor hesitated momentarily, then asked for sterile gloves. "I'll do the procedure here." They examined the wound. The bleeding was severe. Taylor reached out, then stopped. Monroe tensed. "The glass is pressing against the main artery, but it's too close to the carotid. If we try to remove it, we're losing him. Do something, Eric," Monroe warned. Margaret couldn't stand it any longer. She left her mop, walked directly to the bed. "Hey, step back," Taylor ordered. Margaret didn't stop. "Not now, doctor," she said with an authority unexpected from a hospital cleaner. Everyone stood in shock. Margaret went to the sink, washed her hands thoroughly, and took a pair of sterile gloves. "What do you think you're doing?" Taylor was red with anger. "Security!" Dr. Monroe stared at Margaret's face in shock. Then, he seemed to recognize her. "Wait," he said to Taylor. Margaret bent over the patient, examining the neck wound with calm, experienced precision. Oxygen levels dropping, swelling in the throat, airway closing. The hospital staff watched in stunned silence. The elderly cleaning lady everyone knew as Quiet Margaret had transformed into someone entirely different. "Tracheostomy kit," Margaret said in a commanding voice. No one moved. "Now!" she ordered. A nurse handed over the supplies in bewilderment. Dr. Taylor stepped forward. "I cannot allow this. This is a hospital employee, a cleaner, not even a nurse." Dr. Monroe couldn't take his eyes off Margaret. "Wilson, Dr. Margaret Wilson," he said in astonishment. "Vietnam, 1971. Or am I remembering correctly?" Margaret nodded, focused on the patient. Glass shard in the throat, pressing against the main artery. But it's not what it seems. There are 2 pieces, one causing arterial bleeding, the other blocking the airway. He won't be able to breathe without removing this piece. Monroe blocked Taylor's path. "Let her continue." "But Chief, this woman is a cleaner." "This woman," Monroe said slowly, "was one of the best combat surgeons in Vietnam. She was already a legend when I was just a resident." Margaret performed the operation with masterful movements honed by years of experience. Her hands didn't show the slightest tremor. She made an incision near the sternum and placed the tracheostomy with amazing dexterity. Then she began removing the glass fragments, each movement reflecting decades of experience. "The artery isn't damaged," she said calmly. The shape of the glass was actually applying pressure, preventing the bleeding from worsening. Within 10 minutes, Margaret had stabilized the injury. The young soldier was breathing again. The blood loss stopped. Dr. Taylor stood frozen in disbelief. The woman he had just thought of as just a cleaner had performed the most impressive emergency surgical intervention he had ever witnessed. Margaret removed her gloves, washed her bloody hands, and quietly picked up her mop. "Dr. Wilson," Monroe said, addressing everyone in the room, "we owe you our thanks." "Margaret is enough," the woman said. "I'm just Margaret now." Dr. Monroe turned to the other staff. Dr. Margaret Wilson was the chief surgeon at MASH 4077 in Vietnam. She saved thousands of soldiers' lives on the battlefield. She holds the Military Merit Medal and was one of the most important figures in surgery at Johns Hopkins during her time. Taylor swallowed hard. "Then why am I a cleaner?" Margaret completed his sentence. "Sometimes a person wants to distance themselves from their past, doctor, but some things stay with you." Monroe added, "Margaret suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after the war. She abandoned her brilliant career, disappeared without telling anyone. Nobody knew what had happened to her." Margaret shrugged. "I just wanted a quiet life, but I guess once surgery gets in your blood, it never fully leaves." The next day, an announcement was made at Walter Reed Military Medical Center. Dr. Margaret Wilson would be starting as the hospital's new trauma consultant, not full-time, just 3 days a week, solely for mentoring young doctors. And yes, she could still clean sometimes if she wanted to. Margaret had said that's what she preferred. Dr. Taylor stood outside Margaret's new office, a small room that had once been a storage closet but was now her workspace. "Dr. Wilson," Taylor said, knocking on the door. "I'm sorry." "Margaret," she corrected him, placing a medical textbook from 1971 on her shelf. "Margaret, I apologize for underestimating you." The woman turned and looked at Taylor. "You know, I learned something in Vietnam. To understand who people really are, you shouldn't look at their uniforms, but at what they do in difficult moments." Taylor bowed his head. "You have so much to teach me." "Maybe," said Margaret, "but you never saw me this way, did you? The cleaning lady, the old woman mopping the corridor. We see what we want to see, Dr. Taylor. There are many invisible heroes in the world. Perhaps it's time to start noticing them." 5 months later, Dr. Taylor was giving a case presentation, Old Techniques and Modern Approaches in Trauma Surgery. In the corner of his presentation slides was a note, "With thanks to Dr. Margaret Wilson for sharing her wisdom and humility." And in the hospital corridors, a surgeon, who sometimes still used her mop, was greeted with the same respect by orderlies and doctors alike. Margaret Wilson was a hero in any uniform. People just needed to know how to see her. 3 days after the incident, an extraordinary meeting was held at Walter Reed Military Medical Center. All senior doctors, head nurses, and board members gathered in the large conference hall. In the front row, still wearing her blue cleaning uniform, sat Margaret Wilson. Dr. Monroe took the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've gathered here today to make an extraordinary announcement. As most of you know, 3 days ago an incident occurred at our hospital. During an emergency trauma case, our cleaning staff member Margaret Wilson displayed exceptional surgical skills, saving a soldier's life." The hall was silent, everyone listening attentively. "Today, I'd like to formally introduce you to Dr. Margaret Wilson." Dr. Wilson was chief surgeon at MASH 4077 during the Vietnam War. She saved thousands of soldiers' lives on the battlefield. She holds the Military Merit Medal and was one of the most important figures in surgery at Johns Hopkins during her era. And for the past 15 years, she's been quietly working among us as a member of our cleaning staff. A wave of astonishment spread through the hall. Some doctors looked at each other and whispered. Monroe continued, "Dr. Wilson will be joining our hospital as the new trauma surgery consultant. She will mentor our young doctors, review our trauma protocols, and intervene in surgical procedures when necessary." Dr. Taylor stood up. "Dr. Wilson, I want to apologize to you. I was disrespectful towards you, and I'm truly sorry for that." Margaret nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Taylor. It's in the past now." After the meeting, Margaret went to her old locker room. She opened her locker, took out her old photograph. That young surgeon in Vietnam now seemed like a distant memory. She placed the photo in her bag and began walking through the hospital corridors. As she walked down the corridor, Dr. Taylor approached her. "Dr. Wilson, Margaret, I'm really embarrassed." Margaret stopped and looked at him. "There's no need to be embarrassed, doctor. People generally see what they want to see. But I ignored you, belittled you. You know, I learned something in Vietnam," Margaret said. "To understand who people really are, you shouldn't look at their uniforms, but at what they do in difficult moments. You're a good surgeon, Taylor. A bit of arrogance, but that passes with time." Taylor bowed his head. "You have so much to teach me." "Maybe," said Margaret. "But remember, in life, we see what we want to see." There are many invisible heroes in the world. Perhaps it's time to start noticing them. 6 months later, a ceremony was held at Walter Reed Military Medical Center. Dr. Margaret Wilson was inaugurating the hospital's new trauma center. She now worked as a full-time consultant, training young doctors and assisting in complex cases. Dr. Taylor had been appointed as the assistant chief of the new trauma center. Under Margaret's guidance, he had become a much more mature and understanding doctor. During the ceremony, Margaret took the podium to give a speech. She no longer wore a blue cleaning uniform, but a white doctor's coat. "Life sometimes gives us second chances," she told the crowd. "Sometimes these chances come at the most unexpected moments. My story might teach us all something. Not to judge anyone by their appearance, to remember that everyone has a story, and sometimes the most valuable wisdom can come from the most unexpected places." As she finished her speech, her eyes caught a figure at the back of the hall, an elderly man, standing in military uniform. Margaret recognized him immediately, her commander in Vietnam, now retired General Howard Thompson. After the ceremony, the two met in the hospital garden. "Margaret," said the elderly general, "it's great to see you again." "You too, Commander. I'm retired now. Call me Howard." Margaret smiled. "How did you find me, Howard?" "News travels, especially about a legend like you. It's incredible that you could hide as a cleaner for 15 years. "I wasn't hiding," Margaret said. "I was just living a different life, and now you're back." "Yes, I suppose I am." Howard placed his hand on Margaret's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Wilson. You were always my best surgeon." "Thank you, Commander." As she returned to the hospital from the garden, Margaret saw a new cleaner working in the corridor. He was an elderly man, quietly doing his job. Margaret stopped and approached him. "Hello, I'm Dr. Wilson." The old man was surprised. "Hello, Doctor. I'm James, the new cleaner." "How do you like the hospital, James?" "It's a nice place. People don't usually notice me, but that's okay. I love my job." Margaret smiled. "Everyone is important here, James. Never forget that." "Thank you, Doctor," said James, with a surprised but grateful expression. Margaret continued on her way, her white coat gleaming in the corridor lights. In the pocket of her coat was that old photograph from Vietnam, no longer as a reminder, but as a badge of honor. 1 year later, Dr. Taylor was giving a case presentation, Old Techniques and Modern Approaches in Trauma Surgery. In the corner of his presentation slides was a note, with thanks to Dr. Margaret Wilson for sharing her wisdom and humility. At the end of the presentation, Taylor invited Dr. Wilson to the podium. Margaret was now a respected figure throughout the hospital. Young doctors lined up to learn from her. Nurses emulated her treatment approaches, and her old cleaning colleagues were now part of her special team. Margaret had never forgotten the importance of cleaning staff in the hospital. Margaret took the podium and looked at the hall. "Medicine is not just a science, but an art of humanity," she began her speech. "Every patient, every colleague, every hospital worker is a story, and sometimes the stories that seem the most ordinary are the most extraordinary one." In the corridors of Walter Reed Military Medical Center, Dr. Margaret Wilson now walked in her white coat. But sometimes, just for herself, she would put on her old blue cleaning uniform and quietly clean the corners of the hospital, because she knew that what makes a person valuable is not the uniform they wear, but how they touch lives. And if you ever see a doctor in a blue cleaning uniform, or a cleaner in a white doctor's coat in the hospital corridors, know that it is Margaret Wilson, the most visible of the invisible heroes. As the story ends, a reminder stays with the viewers. Sometimes we might be ignoring the most important people who touch our lives, because true heroes often hide in the most unexpected places. How did you treat the invisible people around you today? Perhaps their stories are far more extraordinary than you could imagine.